All right, on this episode of Watch Culture, we're going to be talking about mom and dad. That's right, your parents. No, I'm just kidding. We're actually talking about the 2017 Nicolas Cage Selma Blair movie directed by Brian Taylor. It's going to be a good one. All right, we're back for another episode of Watch Culture, the show where we give you recommendations on movies you should watch. I'm Tim, and today we're talking about the movie Mom and Dad. It's a 2017 movie directed by Brian Taylor, also known for his Crank and Crank High Voltage and the Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance sequel. Brian is a bit of an action guy, as you can tell, and Mom and Dad is no different from that. This is a bit of a thriller, a bit of a horror movie. There's some dark comedy in it. Nicolas Cage stars, so I feel like this is like the perfect role for him. The premise of the movie is that there is a disease that's going around in North America, specifically in the United States. At least that's where the movie takes place. And parents are reverting to a biological function known as savaging. At least that's what the news media in the film call it. And what savaging is when parents actually turn on their own offspring and eat them or kill them or what have you. And in the film, what happens is over a period of time, more and more families are getting affected by this. And as much as Selma Blair, the mom Kendall, tries to keep the family together, they're susceptible to it as well. Ann Winters and Zachary Arthur play the two children, so you have a teenage daughter and a prepubescent son. Nicolas Cage plays the dad, and he's disgruntled, disillusioned, calling back to a time when he was young and could drive his car wherever he wanted and be with a bunch of different girls, whereas the mom is kind of harking back to when she had little babies and they were her whole world and she was theirs. So in the film, we get to see some great opportunities for violence to happen, and it kind of flips the narrative on its head about what would you do if your parents decided to start attacking you. And in fact, Grandpa and Grandma are supposed to be stopping by for a visit in the time frame of the movie, and later on they do visit. So there's intergenerational things happening there too, which is kind of neat. I don't particularly care for the weird midlife crisis that happens between Nicolas Cage and his wife. It's kind of just spoon-fed into the story, but overall, it's really, really interesting, and it was rated pretty low on the audience side on Rotten Tomatoes. It gave about 40%, but it's about a 75 in terms of a critical reception, and I can see why people would feel that way about it, because it's not your typical movie, and it's definitely a harkening back to exploitation films of the 70s and 60s. And it's got this really dated dubstep soundtrack that layers over top of it, which is awesome because dubstep is awful, and it's definitely long overdue to be out of our collective conscious. But in the context of this movie, it makes perfect sense because it's hyper violent and aggressive, and it's weirdly mixed in with the mundanity of life. And Brian Taylor is really good at fusing those two elements together, anarchy and domesticity. Also, you get an appearance from Grant Morrison, who was the writer of Happy, which was one of the television shows that Brian Taylor was involved in. And it's the first film that Mr. Taylor has directed that hasn't been a collaboration with his friend Mark Neveldon, who does pretty much everything with him. So that said, this is going to be a bit of a shorter review because there's not a ton to it. It's a short film. It's pretty straightforward. The premise is pretty straightforward. It's really fun though, and Nicolas Cage is incredible in it because he's insane, and as you know, that's kind of his thing. He does these over-the-top characters, and this is one of those times where it makes sense for him to be that way. He even said it was his favorite performance in the past 10 years. So if that isn't a recommendation on its own, that Nicolas Cage is recommending this movie, then, you know, take my recommendation. But that said, this has been my review / recommendation of Mom and Dad. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed the review, and even better, subscribe to the channel if you want to be involved in more of these videos. Hit the bell, get some notifications. I will let you know when we're doing album and movie and board game recommendations. And on top of that, we do have Crosstalk, where we do discussion on themes in popular culture, and of course professional interviews with artists. So that's been Mom and Dad. Thanks for watching. I actually said everything I needed to say in this video, probably because I more recently watched it. And this is turned on, and that was recording, and that was recording. It was like perfect.
Everything happened that was supposed to.